Secrets of our backyards to the realities of the third world. We take a raw and real look into the challenges and the pursuits of social justice. Welcome to The Point.
The Point podcast is brought to you by La Point Foundation, offering healthcare, entrepreneurship, and education in rural Haiti. Visit lapointefoundation.org to find out how you can get involved. Research has shown that to break the cycle of generational poverty, children need long-term relationship-based support. This support helps them graduate from high school, remain free from involvement in the criminal justice system, and wait to parent until after their teen years. And this is exactly what Friends of the Children is doing. It's a nonprofit organization that was founded in 1993 in Portland with salaried professional mentors and 24 children. Today, they are a $33 million network with over 22 locations. We are joined by two of these world-changing individuals, CEO Terri Sorensen and Executive Director Thomas Lee. They're here to educate us on foster care, the causes, the solutions, and how each of us can get involved. So please join me in welcoming Terri and Thomas. Terri, why don't we start with you? How did you get involved in this line of work?
It really goes back to a personal story of my mother. She was adopted out of a kinship care arrangement and grew up in a house that was 2 bedrooms with 7 family members living in it. And she became pregnant with me as a teenager. You know, when I think about the work we do, I think a lot about my mother and just they didn't have much, but they were able to get by and have a healthy childhood. She never got to go to college, though. They didn't have the funding for that. I think since she was adopted also, that was just biological kids got to go to college and she never got to go. So that's what really brings me to this work. My background, though, is I'm a CPA, and I actually worked at Ernst & Young and Sprint Corporation in the corporate world for about 10 years before coming to working at Friends of the Children. And I've been fortunate to be here 18 years. I ran our founding chapter in Portland, overseeing the work, and then stepped into the national role 9 years ago. And during that time, I've been able to grow the program from 5 locations around the country to 24 and over 10,000 children and families. I was able to use my business skills and background to come to work for an organization that's very personal to my background as well.
I love that. Yeah, I was surprised when I saw on your bio your education, but I love how, as we spoke about a bit offline, is that we can all be used regardless of what our circumstances are, or that nonprofit work, you don't necessarily have to be a social worker, that there's all nonprofit work you can get plugged in all different ways. Thomas Lee, let's hear your story. How did you get involved?
Well, I first came into contact with Friends of the Children when they were launching the Los Angeles site. And at the time, I was working with a legal advocacy nonprofit called the Alliance for Children's Rights, doing some collective impact work. And since the essence of collective impact work is about building strong relationships with the broader child welfare community, and just to stay on that theme of how we can all be used, I've always identified the child welfare community, not just our state-controlled and county-controlled systems, but it includes school systems, it includes law enforcement, it includes all community-based organizations or organizations that have children in mind, but also the larger, broader society, and that all children belong to us and nobody's absolved of that responsibility. And so work is bring together that larger village to be focused around a couple of outcomes when it comes to foster youth: greater educational attainment after high school, as well as more exposure and opportunities in career pathways. But throughout all of my years of work, I've always tried to be in places where I could be of the most use. I've had some experience in building transitional housing programs, resource centers, making sure that there were curriculums that were culturally responsive, as well as intentional in meeting the needs of foster youth. I've also was an educator for 7 years and taught English at the high school and college level. But again, I think in every place where I've had the opportunity to serve, is the number one goal is also being, of course, the most use. And so when I got an invitation to join the Friends of the Children team, I felt like it was the greatest and best opportunity for me to really be of the most use and really make a difference within this lifetime.
Mm. Tell us a bit about Friends of the Children. From what I know, they work within the foster care system. So maybe we should start out with that as a foundation. Maybe you can educate us and even give us some vocabulary of what is the foster care system and who's in it and how do people get into the system? What does it look like?
That's a great question. And I think we haven't done a great job in really framing this issue. So everybody is very attuned to what it is and how to respond to it and how to be empathetic to people who have been in foster care. And so thinking historically, when we think about foster children, of course, the terminology has changed over the years. At one time, they were called orphans. And these, of course, people who didn't have their families to take care of them. By today's standards, when you think of foster care, we think about out-of-home placement for children. Okay. That's temporary until those children can be connected with a relative. And if they can't be connected to a relative, we'll find some foster parents or adoptive parents, some surrogate parents who could potentially come aboard and take up the mantle and support these children and help them develop and mature into healthy, whole adults. But foster care also includes placements where sometimes youth are placed in group homes. Sometimes it's temporary, sometimes it's long-term. And these group homes also include residential care facilities, emergency shelters, supervised independent living situations, especially with kids with acute mental health and needs based on history of trauma or potentially developmental needs that are identified early at birth.
I'll add just what Friends of the Children does. So we select children early, age 4 to 6, who are either in foster care or there's been experience with foster care, either with the child or their parents. And we provide them with a salaried professional mentor we call a friend all the way through their whole childhood. So age 4 to 6 through graduation, no matter what. You know, it's a great program. And in Los Angeles, we launched a pilot that is now spreading across the country in many of our sites. But there are more youth in foster care in LA than anywhere in the country, over 30,000. And when we had the funding to go into LA, that was provided by the Balmer Group and some other funders and the Social Innovation Fund, the community really said, with all these kids in foster care, there is a smaller group who are aging out or who have experienced foster care and their parents, they have 4 to 6-year-olds. Would you consider a 2-gen approach to come in and select the children and also be there for their caregiver? And so that was a really exciting moment for us because it was really about prevention of trauma for children and families and really empowering and supporting not just the child, but the family. And that has a ripple effect on all the kids that are in the family.
Yeah, that's awesome. So something that I've heard from other people in this field is that for kids growing up in this type of system, that a lot of times all they need is just one person who completely believes in them and supports them. So is that kind of the idea behind Friends of the Children, to take this approach because they were seeing that maybe there was a lot of instability happening? I've also heard a stat that foster kids change schools on average 7 times. So maybe their world is just really full of instability, and this offers something as kind of a foundation.
I would say that's spot on. Of course, in optimal settings, we know that typically it requires more than just one person. You know, when you think about support systems are incredibly important to eliminate the need for social systems. And so when those support systems aren't in place, Friends of the Children tries to fill that hole by making sure there's a dedicated individual, a friend, as we call them, that is working one-on-one with that child and working one-on-one with that parent, that entire family, to start building that larger support social system. And in that way, in our work, of course, as Terri mentioned, it's 4 hours a week, 2 hours in the classroom, 2 hours in the home. It's in the community. It's working with the extended family members once they're identified. The goal is being able to bring them all together and really start to create a village of support. And all of these folks come together as one, as believers in the future, in the hopes and dreams of those children that we're supporting. And that's really how we start all of our relationships, is asking the family and asking the child, what are the hopes and dreams that you have for your child? What are the hopes and dreams you have for your family? How can we participate in helping you achieve those goals? And that's how we build our relationships. And of course, our program is entirely voluntarily. So when parents choose us, we look at this as a huge opportunity to be friends with them and to support them over a 12 plus year trajectory as they grow and get stronger and provide and become closer as families, but become a part of the greater fabric of our larger community and society.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important to know this model really pushes mentoring out of the volunteer realm.
Okay.
And the reason we do that is when we're taking children and families who face the kind of challenges and barriers that Thomas was mentioning and systemic barriers, we want someone who's trained, who it's their full-time job to work with 8 children and families. And they're paid salary and benefits. Often our friends have lived experience. Often they've been in foster care as well, or have other experienced systemic racism, poverty, other challenges. And so they bring that lived experience as well as in the training we provide to really understand where children and families are at and help them get through these tough times.
That's so good. Talk to us a little bit. You have some really incredible stats. 83% of your program graduates have earned a high school diploma, although they have come from families in which 60% have not completed high school. So I know that, friend, like a lot of what you do is kind of try to end generational poverty. So maybe if we can explain exactly what that is, because I think sometimes when we don't have that lived experience. For example, I was driving through a neighborhood with somebody from Iowa the other day, and we were driving through kind of a rough neighborhood in Orlando, and they said to me, like, don't these people want to leave? They couldn't really understand the concept of how people get, for lack of a better term, stuck in these situations. So if we can unpack that a little bit, I think that can really offer a lot of insight, and then kind of follow up with how Friends of the Children is able to kind of break that generational cycle.
I think it's important to go back to how Friends of the Children was founded. So our founder, Duncan Campbell, he himself would have been a child in the program. Parents in and out of prison, lived without much, was neglected as a child, often left alone, even as a toddler. And when he was able to, through the help of mentors in his life, friends, parents, teachers, coaches, graduate from high school, graduate from college. He went on to work in the juvenile justice system because he really wanted to give back. And at that point, he saw that most of the youth who were in there wouldn't have had to be there if earlier on they'd had folks to help show them the way. So he had that idea. He went on to become a great entrepreneur and founded one of the first timber investment firms called Campbell Global. And when he sold that almost 30 years ago, for the first time he had resources, and he hired a researcher to travel the country. They spent 2 years saying what program would help these kids who fall through the cracks through no fault of their own. And the researcher came back and he said, there isn't such a program, but if you start early, you stay for the long term, you pay people to do this work so that they stay. And the average friend stays about 6 years out of the 12-year cycle. So they have one friend early on and one friend later. You can break generational cycles. And at the time, the research pointed to 3 areas that break generational cycles of poverty: graduation from high school, and 83% of our kids do; avoidance of the justice system, 93% of our youth avoid the justice system; and then avoiding teen parenting, and 98% of our youth avoid teen parenting. Well, now that we have 30 years, our kids are going on to do great things. 92% accomplish one of our 3 E's: enrollment in post-secondary, enlistment in the military, or employment in a living wage job. So those were really the indicators that would break the cycle of poverty. But the key is really the power of the relationship between a caring adult and a youth, and then now ultimately the family.
That's so good. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, Callie, and I would just add that thinking about, some of the observations that we often all have when we drive through communities or hear stories, it's very easy to focus on individual behavior and not look at the larger system and environment and ecological things that are happening in order to kind of foster it and perpetuate it over time. And one of the things that we've done, as Terry's mentioned, we're a very data-driven organization. And the data not only tells us about what works, but it also tells us where we ought to serve. Okay. And one of the things that we found through the data is that foster youth, when they do become parents, have the highest rate of children who end up being exposed to foster care themselves through neglect and abuse. That exposure to the foster care system is in part a combination of where youth are born, what zip codes they're from. It's in part what contributes to it is poverty. Another thing that contributes to it is having really solid individuals to learn from. When you're thinking about examples of good parenting and what love and support looks and feels like. And when we think about foster youth, there's a lot of connotations and a lot of images that come to our mind. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that we don't often conjure up in our own imaginations when we think about children in foster care is that these are children in foster care by no fault of their own. Mm-hmm. They didn't do anything to deserve to be exposed to neglect and abuse. And the vast majority of children come into contact with foster care systems because of neglect first, abuse second. And we tend to automatically think that somehow that these children are damaged, that these children are bad kids. These children are other people's children and not our own. And so we have to change the way we think about children in general. Like I said earlier, we all are a part of the child welfare system, and that these children are our own. They're not other people's children. And when they do, through no fault of their own, become exposed and are displaced from their homes or at risk of being displaced, how do we get activated to come in and play our role as a larger society and provide them with the supports they need to get through those initial traumas? How do we help them, give them the support they need to get exposed to the best and brightest ideas and enrichment activities so they can start to realize that the full menu of opportunity that the world has to offer is meant for them too, not just for some. And I think last but not least, when we think about, again, families that are born in certain locales and thinking about the kind of opportunities and resources that they have, they're not the same in every zip code. And so when you're born in the zip code where you have under-resourced schools, when you have very little options for mobility and transportation, and you have very few options in terms of exposure to some of the different career pathways that are available in other regions of, say, for example, Los Angeles County, it tends to become a perpetuating cycle where children can only be what they see. That's one of the things that we're trying to address at Friends of the Children, is to broaden the line of sight, get people to create a great understanding and really create the conditions for change for these children to start to believe that they can not only have more options than they ever imagined, but also help transform their own community. So it's not about getting out, it's about transforming and changing from within.
That's good.
I was just going to say that, it's a well-known fact, particularly Black children and Native American children are very overrepresented in the foster care system. And so are all children in poverty. And I think that comes back to folks with different cultures from your own, different observations about what neglect means. I think it's important for everyone to know, like, the trauma that happens when a child goes into foster care for that family is severe. I mean, they're often taken in the middle of the night. They're given a garbage bag to put their things in, and then they end up in an office at child welfare or in a motel until a family is found. And sometimes it takes weeks, months for their cases to come forward. They're missing their siblings. The trauma is pretty severe. So what I love about our program is we really want to be on the side of innovation. Before children are taken, let's give the family a friend and prevent that trauma. You have someone you can reach out to if you're just feeling like you can't cope that day, or, you're on the edge of a mental health breakdown, things that we can do to step in and prevent children from ever going into foster care, which ultimately, that's what everybody wants. Everyone wants to see fewer children in foster care.
How do people find you then? So, because I thought it was interesting that you said that the families actually seek you out. Is that the way it works? Do you seek the families out? Are you connected through social worker? How does it work? How does it get started?
Well, let me tell you, it's a combination of it's a variety of things. We have sites across the country that work and begin the connections with children by being in the schools and working closely with school districts and teachers and site administrators to identify youth who could benefit from the Friends of the Children model. In other locations, like here in Los Angeles, we have lots of partnerships with community-based organizations with our larger child welfare system, and we work in tandem to identify children and families who could benefit from these supports. As Terri mentioned a second ago, we utilize data and identify those families who have come into contact and have been investigated for neglect and abuse. And instead of the child or just kind of hoping that nothing else happens, we want to meet those families and talk to them about the Friends model and see whether or not they'd be open to allowing us in their lives to work with them so we can keep foster care in the rear view of their lives. And so it is through lots of strong collaboration, working with our larger child welfare system and all the different players. And then also there are times where parents, and this is, another beautiful part of our work, is that parents hear about us through other parents who are receiving services. Okay. And when those parents go out and share what their experience is like with being a part of our program, those tend to be the best referrals we could ever get because we're being vouched for by the people that we want to hear from the most.
That's awesome. Do you have both individually, maybe like a favorite success story or moment that you remember through your work with Friends of the Children that kind of helps you keep going on the hard days?
Absolutely. I mean, there are thousands of stories, first of all, but one of my favorites is a young man named Patrick, who is now nearly 30. You know, he came into our program at age 5, was the kid sitting in the back of the classroom, very quiet, withdrawn, not showing up for school regularly. And when his friend Carlos, after observing for 6 weeks kind of the classroom and verifying with teachers and counselors, selected Patrick for the program, it was really transformative. He was shortly thereafter placed into foster care right as we were coming on board. His mother, unfortunately, had a drug addiction. He never knew his father, and all of his 5 brothers and sisters were placed in different homes. Wow. So Carlos was that one person that he had throughout, and he actually was with Carlos the entire 12 plus years of the program. But over the years, Carlos works on some of what we call core assets, things like growth mindset. You can actually do anything if you learn and continue to learn, and found his spark. And for Patrick, that was playing football, and it was also public speaking. And he really found his voice when he was in college and spoke in front of the state legislature to advocate for a foster care bill of rights that would help him and other kids who had experienced foster care. He went on to be the first in his family to not only graduate from high school, but graduate from college. He is a thriving community citizen today. He actually went out and worked with the foster care system for a couple of years in the state of Oregon, which really helping inform what that experience was like for him and helping create policies that would help children. So that is one of my favorite stories because it comes full circle.
Full circle, yeah.
Yeah. But there were a lot of ups and downs during that 12 years. It's not like a child gets a friend and boom, it's straight sailing. That's one of my favorite stories.
That's incredible. I love that there was this like approach to it that he was like, not only am I going to like change my life, but I'm also going to implement this into the system so that other kids can have the same opportunity.
I don't have a story as fantastic as Terri's. We've only been in business here in Los Angeles for 3 years, but I will share a brief one. And this one's a little different. So I mentioned earlier that I used to run a transitional housing program for foster youth. And the purpose of that program was to help foster youth have a longer off-ramp into life. And they didn't just exit foster care at 18 years old and expect to handle all the responsibilities of an adult without getting some extra skills and support in order to do it well. And so one of the youth that I used to serve many years ago, his name is Victor. He was what we call a crossover youth. And crossover means that he not only experienced time in foster care, but he also spent time in our juvenile justice system. And so Victor was first introduced to me as a candidate for our transitional housing while he was on probation as an 18-year-old, and he had a sword kind of dangling over his head because his probation officer said that if he made one more mistake, he was going to be deported back to Mexico.
Wow.
And sure enough, we took a chance on Victor because he didn't have his documentation. And one of the core elements of our program at the time was that youth had to not only receive the housing, but they had to go to work. And so without documentation, the question was really clear for us is how do we get him employed if he doesn't have documentation? So we were able to find a internship for him through one of our board members. Let me just tell you, when Victor joined our program and we took a chance on him and he, and chose us, he never looked back. And he, over the years, he not only worked different jobs and excelled in all of them, eventually got his residency, eventually became a citizen. He earned his bachelor's degree. And when he earned his bachelor's degree, it was right at the same time Friends LA was formed, and he joined our team. And so like Terri mentioned before, a lot of our staff have lived experience in the foster care system. Victor not only joined our team as a friend, but he became one of the preeminent friends that we had. All the 8 boys that he works with and 8 families love him dearly for how much care that he gives each child. And Victor now has just recently, he's been accepted at Cal State Los Angeles to start the Master's in Social Work program. And so he's going after his master's degree in social work so he can do more good. So just an amazing way of how a person that's in our organization who is paying it forward and committed his life to this work in spite of all of the tough odds before them. And I think he is a great example of what can be possible when you have the support in place to support you along the way. And even during those times, as Terri mentioned, it's not all rosy. During those times when the road gets tough, to still have people who care about you, that believe in you, and they're going to cheer you on in spite of it all. And then that's where you start to see greater outcomes long-term. And so I think if there's one thing to learn from that example and so many others that we can share is the importance of having someone that's dedicated to you, is not going to give up, because everybody has their own due time when they reach that full maturity. I know that I was a late bloomer myself. And so when you have people that give you a little bit more time to really blossom into who you're supposed to be, I think it's important to give people opportunity to be able to show them that beautiful part of yourself, just giving them the right amount of time. And so that's one story we're really proud of here in Los Angeles.
That's definitely a story to be proud of. I love that. I can't wait to even hear over the next few years how that continues to play out. It's incredible. So thank you for sharing those stories. If I'm incredibly touched by them, if some of our listeners are touched by this and, maybe have been thinking about how they fit into this equation, can you walk us through what that would look like to work with Friends of the Children or get involved or donate, or how can people support what you all are doing?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. Number one, we are expanding across the country. If folks are interested in what it takes to start a Friends of the Children chapter, I would say go to the friendsofthechildren.org national website. We look for multiple calls from a place and some viable supporters who could help us get that started. We also have so many children and families that need support right now. So volunteers, everything from book donations to food drop-offs to helping with fundraising events. There's lots of ways people can get involved in various chapters. And again, there are 24 across the country. But Thomas, you probably have some more specific ways in LA.
Sure. Yes. We always have opportunities to volunteer, to engage directly with children, our parents. We love to, again, increase the line of sight of all of our program participants. There's even workforce development. There's certain skill sets. We work closely with corporations to expose some of the different workforce opportunities, as well as to be engaged in all of the work that we do. I think there's also opportunities for corporate sponsorship, of course, for donations. We're fighting for 12 plus years. That's a long-term commitment. No other organization is doing anything along those lines. And so in order to fulfill that commitment, it takes resources. And so we're looking to, like I said, broaden our village of support, especially as a fairly new organization. we need as many individuals want to get involved, and let's work together and partner and find a place for people to engage. We have opportunities. We have a junior board. We also have a governance board. We're always looking for new people to want to help breathe more life and energy into some of our strategic plans for the future. We are growing rapidly here in Los Angeles, and there's so much need to scale. Terri mentioned earlier, in just Los Angeles County alone, there are over 30,000 children in the foster care system.
Wow.
And of that 30,000, each year, roughly about 2,500 are between the ages of 4 and 6 when we enroll them. It would be an amazing opportunity for us to figure out a way to ultimately pair as many friends as possible to children who benefit from our services out of that 2,500 every single year, so we can start to really see change in our lifetime. And so that's what we're all about here as an organization here in Los Angeles. And we really are looking for others to join our larger Friends of the Children family.
I love that. I recently had a conversation with Brian Mavis of America's Kids Belong, and their kind of slogan is change who waits. So instead of all of these kids, waiting for a friend or a mentor like that, hopefully someday there can be so many people out there that they're waiting for a kid. Speak to us briefly about what the specifics are for a mentor or friend, as it is called, what that would look like. Is it people, they have to be a certain age? Do they need a bachelor's degree? Do they have to be a homeowner so that they're not going anywhere for 12 years? What does that look like?
Yes. Well, typically, and we are currently hiring, by the way, here in Los Angeles, across the country.
All across the country, everybody. All right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Friends are typically, they have a bachelor's degree and at least 2 to 3 years of experience. These are people who they come from variety of disciplines: education, early childhood development, sociology, psychology. And some may just have, lots of experience in volunteering and giving back. And they just are very intuitive and maybe not the trained in the traditional worlds of working with children, but they have lots of experience in other quarters of our society working with children. And we're looking for all of those men and women who are interested in making a difference. And like I said, and taking on a caseload of 8 children and pouring all the love possible into those 8. Like I said, we are hiring across the country and locally. We feel like it's an incredibly important job that you can really see a difference happening in real time. And I think that's one of the beautiful parts about about the Friends of the Children model, is that when you think about childcare in general, there are usually few amount of people tasked to take on inordinate amount of children. And so it's really hard to see changes that you would love to see, because again, you just don't have enough bandwidth to give each child all the individualized need and support that they deserve. And so the Friends model, there's been like I said, an opportunity to create that environment for that kind of change.
Did you have anything to add to that, Terri?
Well, I just like to leave people with only 50% of children in the foster care system in many parts of the country graduate from high school. Only 5% go on to graduate from college in many parts of the country. And we really want to change that narrative and those statistics. Just because you experienced the foster care system shouldn't dictate what your future is going to be like. And I think we've proven with a friend at your side, with caring adults who are going to be there for the long term to help you through some of these challenges and barriers, that based on your upbringing, you don't have those skills or the knowledge to do that we can get kids to 100% going to college or trade school or the military or living wage job. And we can get everybody graduating from high school. It's possible. The narrative has to change. People have to believe in our kids.
So good. So well said. Is there any last words for our listeners that you have? I'll be sure to have the links in the show notes as well, friendsofthechildren.org. And of course, go ahead and email me, Callie at lapointefoundation.org. And I'm happy to connect you as well if this is something you want to get involved in. But did either of you have any last words of wisdom you wanted to make sure people heard?
Thomas always has a last word.
Oh my God. Well, let me just add friendsla.org too. Add that in there too.
Okay.
Encourage them to go to our websites. Please browse around. You'll see plenty of information on our theory of change. You'll see some of the the incredible reports about how we're making a difference, how other people are vouching for the work, you'll also see a number of stories of how we're making a difference around the country and locally. And I think if there's one last thought I think I'd like to put on the minds of everyone is that I think one of the things that I learned and really start to appreciate in a deeper level, and I mentioned it earlier and I'll say it one last time. For many years, we've heard this phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. I think in coming to Friends, in spite of all the work that I've done over the years, I really started to understand the depth of that statement. And many of the families, like I said, we've heard all the stories, we've read all the reports and about how maladaptive a lot of the communities that we serve and children, families that we support are. But we don't learn much about how adaptive they really are. We don't learn about how resourceful and resilient they are. And one of the things that I think that I've seen in our work, children and parents are incredibly resilient. We just don't want them to use all that resilience up in the first years of life. We want that to multiply and get stronger and stronger over time. They are also incredibly adaptive. And when we think about that, I'm thinking about the ability to be able to survive and to create very nurturing and loving homes with very little resources, to be able to stretch $25 to $30 over an entire weekend in order to feed their families and still make sure that there's smiles on everyone's faces. And last but not least, when we enroll children at the ages of 4 and 6, they could care less about their socioeconomic status. They don't care about what neighborhoods they live in. All they care about is being loved and having fun. And we get the extraordinary opportunity to meet them at that moment in life. And that's when they're incredibly receptive to us being a part of their lives. And that's where they embrace the friends that we connect them to. And then they just take off running literally and figuratively from there. And so this is an opportunity to be a part of that experience. And like I said, feel like, be a part of something. Take care.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Allie, see you, Terri. Bye.
Bye.
So happy to meet you both and stay in touch, okay?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us today, and a special thank you to Terri and Thomas for taking the time out of their schedules to help educate us on what exactly is happening in the foster care system and how we can get involved. If you'd like more information, you can always find it in the show notes at lapointefoundation.org. And you can also connect directly with Friends of the Children at friendsofthechildren.org. That's friends with an S at the end. Be sure to follow them on social media as well. And as always, we'd love to get feedback from you on how this episode impacted you. You can reach me directly at callie@lapointefoundation.org. Thank you again for your time today. And until next time, keep on fighting for justice.